The 19th of August 2021. Welcome, everybody. I'm Dana Durnford, your host, the nuclearproctologist.org. You can try calling 709-589-4406. If you want to call in, the lines are open 24 hours a day. If I can answer a question, I will. If I can direct you to the answer that I don't know, I will. And worst case scenario, I can always call you back with the answer if you've got questions. Except for that guy there. Hi, it's Dana Durnford, the nuclearproctologist.org. How can I help you tonight? You're a stalker. Why are you stalking me?
No, I'm not stalking. Just like to talk to you.
I couldn't care less. You're stalking me every day. You call me 15 times
What?
and threaten me.
Why?
What a strange character, eh? He's from the Tokyo Bureau of Scumbags, apparently. So we'll talk about the tanks a little bit coming up with the International Atomic Energy Agency. And they're growing food in nuclear wastelands. And if you eat it, you're going to get sick and die. If you feed it to your children, they're going to get sick and die. This is not a game. Let me play this little short video.
There will soon be an end to this cold and wicked war when those hard-headed communists get what they're looking for. Only one thing that will stop them, and they're a ferocious fun. If General MacArthur drops a atomic bomb, there'll be fire, dust, and metal flying all around, and the radioactivity will burn them to the ground. If there's any commies left, they'll be all on the run. If General MacArthur drops a atomic bomb.
Yeah, okay, well, let's get into it. Do you know they found plutonium in every sample? It's everywhere. And so every time they found cesium, they also found plutonium, which is named after the devil. And that a single atom, particle of plutonium can cause you tumor in your lungs. Now, there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases. Hey, don't you have children you should be molesting or something? I shouldn't say that, I suppose, because I'd love to go out and do it. That's the nuclear industry harassed me on every single show. See, so, bear with me. Air samples in Tokyo are 270 times more contaminated with cesium than global weapons fallout peak. Therefore, you can't eat food from Tokyo. How can you eat food from Fukushima Prefecture? Because what that means is Tokyo is just incredibly contaminated. Fukushima has emerged as a global threat. A global threat, which is why they're harassing me constantly, right? Why they're harassing me constantly. And again tonight I have to turn off the phone because of stalkers. Fukushima has emerged as a global threat, major health concerns along the west coast. And bioaccumulation is where you're always consuming it. And so when you consume a little time, just a single bit of radiation atom, and you put 200 atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. So that atom goes in your body, it binds itself, sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, and your body attacks it with white blood cells for the rest of your life, nonstop. What that means, though, is that now you have less red blood cells, because in order to produce white blood cells, you have to displace the red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen and nutrition throughout your body. And so when you're bioaccumulating it, you're producing more white blood cells all the time because you're getting more and more accumulated into your body. That's eventually called leukemia. If you're eating food from Japan, you can have leukemia this week. In just a couple of days, it'll show up because it's so radioactive. As you'll see if you're hang around. Officials gave tips on how to disguise radiation levels from the public. They don't have anybody to pick on, really, right? So I'd have to take a lot of abuse. They just took down my site with 24,000 subscribers without telling me why. Nuclear engineer agree Fukushima can be an extinction event. It can be an extinction event. Nuclear engineer, not Dana, but a nuclear engineer. Japan professor, 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may still be entering the Pacific. Well, not maybe, it absolutely, positively, unequivocally will be. France says Japan has lost control. The French should leave the country. Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo fearing radiation. So Tokyo obviously is heavily radioactive. So why would you eat food from the Fukushima Prefecture? Officials unsure what to do next. Korea calls Japan's handling of Fukushima. Japan. The nuclear industry is behind all of this, by the way. Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. EU energy commissioners call Fukushima an apocalypse and that everything is out of control. Tokyo has lost almost all control of events at Fukushima, energy official. What I'm going to do is just to get you up to speed on how bad this actually is. Fukushima will now be compared to Chernobyl. 4 nuclear reactors standing in a line are simultaneously spinning out of control. Chernobyl was a single reactor, was a 200-ton reactor. Most of it was the moderator of graphite. Fukushima reactors are 800-ton reactors. With decades of reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings, they were lost also. And there's no moderators, pure uranium, plutonium. It's a completely different monster. And you're talking about 4, not 1. Chernobyl's 1, 4. So if you go look up Chernobyl recent stories, every one of them are going to tell you the same sentence. The world's worst nuclear accident, Chernobyl. So that's not accident that every single media worldwide will give you that sentence. That's an agenda. That's control. That's the most frightening thing imaginable. That's hate. That's contempt for humans by doing that. It shows the industry has this absurd contempt for humans, particularly children. Fukushima is a global threat. Top Hong Kong Chinese newspaper. Situation can prove catastrophic for the world. Former official in Fukushima, this is a disaster of all of humanity, the entire world. How many warnings do you actually need? Nuclear report warns of apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. It could be one day considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. Again, how many people do you need to warn you? So if your house is on fire and your neighbors come up and bang on your door and say, hey, your house is on fire, are you going to say, get lost? Kooky conspiracy theorists. Because that seems to be the new mantra. The slower you spread radiation dose, by the way, the more effectively it produces cancer and up to 1,800 illnesses. Japan is going the very best way in the world for destroying the human race. They found plutonium in every sample. Don't forget that. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. Nuclear engineer agree Fukushima can be an extinction event. Experts agree the species of fisheries and wildlife are endangered globally. Globally due to Fukushima. This is a study over there, and this is a model from a different country showing you the radioactive fallout. That's the Pacific, that's the Atlantic, that's America. Up there is Canada, Iceland, Greenland, United Kingdom, Europe, France, Russia, China. Now the plume stops, the model stops. Do you really think that the plume didn't keep coming? Do you really think that the plume just magically just disappeared because the model was stopped at that particular point? 220 million atoms per liter of fission products in the rainfall per liter. I don't understand why the world doesn't make a stand. I don't understand. I can't wrap my mind around why we don't make a stand. Human civilization may destroy itself. I mean, look at Fukushima. Liquefaction of 3 nuclear reactor cores. Obsolete Optics doesn't like the song I use at the end of my shows. It's Beethoven. I use the song strictly because it's Beethoven. And Obsolete Optics is turning it into a conspiracy theory. You cause me a lot of grief. You realize that you're. I don't understand why you don't like me. I don't understand why you do this to me constantly. In the comment section. I'm not going to put up with it much longer. Human civilization may destroy itself. I mean, look at Fukushima. Liquefaction of 3 nuclear reactor cores. Human civilization may destroy itself. The nuclear industry will destroy us. It's not humans. We don't have control over the nuclear industry. Only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. Nobel Prize winner on United NHK. Only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. A time of reckoning for social media, that's a story, nothing to do with nuclear, mentions nuclear power has the risk of destroying the planet recently. Major U.S. paper, time to quit nuclear power altogether, threatens the very existence of human civilization as we know it. So Obsolete Optics is putting links into people that had me arrested, to scientists that actually had me arrested to cover up their crimes. And he's trying to use that as documentation. Time to quit nuclear power altogether threatens the very existence of human civilization. So I turned the phone back on and he phoned me right away. Unbelievable, eh? Time to quit nuclear power altogether threatens the very existence of human civilization. So they're monitoring my phone 24/7, see? Otherwise, you couldn't do something like that. Time to quit nuclear power altogether threatens the very existence of human civilization. Once a nuclear accident occurs, everything is over. Zero prospects of ever restoring fishing grounds. Nuclear power generation is the only invention that may destroy the future of human beings. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima will be entering the Pacific Ocean. We may not be able to live in Japan someday. 865,000 excess cancers. Cancer is usually latent, the last one to show up, in 2012 in Japan. Almost 1 million extra cancers in just the first year. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, illnesses that will manifest long before cancer. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes, and we are expecting diabetes in children from Fukushima radiation. And radiation lasts for millions of years. So it doesn't matter that that's a 2012 headline. This is applicable for thousands of years. Comparison with X-rays and CAT scans are meaningless. Inhaling radioactive particles inhaling particles increases radiation exposure by a factor of 1 trillion. So you can't go eating food from Fukushima, or Japan rather. Like, you do realize that all this documentation is documentation. $13,646 children with thyroid tumors out of 40,000. That's just 2012, by the way. And pre-Fukushima numbers were 1 to 2 per million. That's because you have over 50 reactors in Japan that are always releasing radiation. So congenital heart disease operation rose 14% after Fukushima nuclear accident. Well, it's 14% per 100,000 children live births. That's 14,000, 14,200, it's 14.2% actually. Children need open heart surgery for every 100,000 children born. That's just one of the many issues the children. So it's not just congenital heart problems that is going to affect newborn, neonates, and infants, but that's one of them. Newborn heart problems surge after Fukushima nuke disaster. And he's seen that after Chernobyl in Belarus and Ukraine. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will come out about Fukushima. Obesity rates now double Japanese average. Fukushima is the most serious man-made disaster in human history. Excessive weight gain after a nuclear crisis is a marker of brain damage. We're going to get into the news coming up. I just got to paint you a picture so you can appreciate it, because a lot of people, if you don't go and look at the original accident, how are you supposed to understand what actually happened? If you don't look at the precedences that were already set, how are you going to postulate everything else, right? Pneumonia cases surged in Japan. You've seen that after Chernobyl. 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur per cubic meter. That's never going to go away. That'll float around and kill people for hundreds of thousands of years. In the California era. And then they've seen 360 of the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. This is a phenomenon from spraying salt water on the melted reactor cores. They're burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And so it liberates the sulfur. The sulfur is radioactive because it comes in contact with the curium, which is, by the way, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker for curium isotopes than you do for plutonium. Plutonium is lethal on the atomic level. So when they say tends to concentrate in the testicles, they're only talking about the males. Do you really think only the males are breathing it in? But it sterilizes you, obviously, is what they're talking about. This also, though, is true for the animal world and the insect world and the birds and all creatures, all species. This doesn't just affect humans. We're in the fight for our lives, and you can pretend that we're not, but you're just going to harm yourself. You need to avoid Japanese food at all costs. And they ship it to other countries and relabel it and then ship it into your countries. So you better start paying attention to what you're eating. Nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home, immediately take off their clothing and cleanse the nuclear contaminants for Taiwan. South Korea closed 130 schools. America and Canada pretended nothing happened. And the winds blow straight to North America, right? I find it really interesting that I'm under siege with only 15 people watching my show. I'm under constant attacks. With 200 subscribers, I'm under constant attacks. I can't even use my phone anymore. It rained in California 10 times more radioactivity. Hot radioactive particles in Seattle at 50% of the levels seen in Tokyo latches onto your lung tissues. Actually burns a hole through your lungs and sequesters in your bones and starts mutating your stem cells. Radiation data from Seattle area survey may be withheld by the feds for national security purposes. Radiation data withheld for national security purposes. See, you gave them the equipment. You gave them the authority. You gave them the monetary. You gave them the education, the pensions and everything. Bursaries for their kids to go to universities, to get an education, take over those jobs. And when they finally have an event, they hide it from you. Because the nuclear industry has captured most of your regulators in key government positions. And not by accident. It's by design. This is a death cult now that has pulled, there's a cliche for it, has pulled a pin. New York Times contributor confirms California rainwater 181 times above drinking water standards. For drinking water. California. Not counting the sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs I showed you earlier. Right? In the California air. 40 million becquerels of iodine-131 in a single bed of kelp off California. Because it comes down with rainfall, a lot of it will wash down to the coastline. And so when you're finding numbers like that, you are in real trouble. Iodine-131, Pennsylvania rainwater samples 3,300% above federal drinking water standards. So you should have abandoned Pennsylvania and California. Oh, and San Francisco. 18,000% above the drinking water standards. Japan, the 1,500 tons you're talking about here, are going to use for soil for gardening, radioactive soil for gardening. Kind of gives you a insight into how disconnected they actually are. Nearly 50,000 tons of the sludge at a water treatment facility, at the water reclamation facility. 8,000 becquerels or more per kilogram is 500,000 becquerels per square meter. And the most contaminated with 89,000 becquerels per kilogram, you multiply that by 64 to get a square meter, at the water reclamation centers. They can't get rid of the sediment from the water reclamation centers. They can't get rid of the ashes from the incinerators. They can't get rid of the sewage or the garbage facilities. because of radiation throughout most of Japan. So why would you eat food, which we're going to get to momentarily, in a nuclear wasteland for? Eerie fog of silence around Fukushima. First surprising thing is there's no sound in the no-go zone. Former U.S. government official, the elephant in the room is Fukushima radiation when it comes to the Pacific Ocean. The elephant in the room is Fukushima radiation when it comes to the Pacific Ocean animal die-off, Fukushima. Mass die-off sea creatures from California to Alaska. Animals are starving as the food chain continues to collapse. Starving because they destroyed the food chain. And now they're going to murder you. Seniors urged to eat Fukushima rice to help farmers and protect the young people. That's 2012. Wrap your mind around that story because that's Japan times. Seniors urged to eat the Fukushima rice to help farmers and protect young people. Do you got any idea? This is, by the way, March 20th, 2012, is long before they even picked up a single bag. And they picked up over 30 million 1 tons that we know about it. A Tokyo senior is waging an individual effort to get the elderly people to eat the rice grown in the Fukushima nuclear wasteland to help the farmers struggling with rumors that their crops are radioactive and to make sure the grain isn't consumed by younger generations. Well, if it's just a rumor, why are you worried about the younger generation eating it? It's literally the strangest headline in human history because the nuclear meltdown is still raging at this point, which it still is but today even. Consumers have shunned Fukushima rice due to radiation fear stemming from the triple meltdowns. Not nuclear meltdowns, but triple meltdowns. That's bags of radiation over there. They're actually, this is a picture from the media saying poor farmers are being hurt by rumors that their crops are radioactive. And they show you this picture of 1 ton bags of radiation and a farmer harvesting rice, golden rice variety. Like literally try waking your mind up to that one. The elderly must eat the Fukushima rice. So if I have poisoned food, I should feed it to the elderly? Instead of putting it on a nuclear waste site? They're calling on seniors to place orders with fax and online via social networking sites, including Mixi and Facebook. Facebook! Grown food in a nuclear wasteland. Those interested in buying the rice must pay cash on delivery. So here's the Japanese Times promoting poison. And apparently that's not a crime to do this. Right? Congress has never made it a crime to poison you with radiation. I got that there somewhere. Congress doesn't have the authority, lacks the authority. Hang on, I'll bring it up for you. Congress lacks the authority. So here's this story here. Just try wrapping your mind around it. I was reading a story. I was like, protester next candidate to plead guilty to seeking nuclear material, but would not get prison under a deal. And I was like, well, why wouldn't he get prison? Okay, so what's going on here? Trying to buy radioactive material online to kill somebody will plead guilty to one of the charges against him, but won't serve any time under a plea deal in federal court. He was originally charged with attempting to possess radioactive material with the intent to cause death essentially a nuclear terrorism charge. He was arrested at blah, 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 FBI agents. If he was trying to kill someone, if he was trying to kill himself, make it appear he was going to be killed by the government, is what he said. Using a substance was difficult for anyone but the government to get their hands on. He said it's unconstitutional to charge him because Congress lacks the authority to criminalize poisoning with radioactive substances. This is what the lawyers said. Congress lacks the authority to criminalize poisoning with radioactive substances. This is why they're shipping food from Fukushima. Wrap your mind around it. Go look the story up and read it yourself. That's actually one of the most important stories imaginable, because that's the loophole they're using to poison you right now. About 700 kilograms were bought by an elderly care facility in Tokyo. 700 kilograms were brought by an elderly care facility in Tokyo. £1,400+ was brought by elderly care facility to murder him. This, however, is a minute amount compared with the Fukushima 2,400 tons annually produced. Now they produce the rice in the surrounding prefectures that are radioactive too. 240,000 tons. 204, and because they're metric in Japan, times 2,200 pounds, and they're shipping that worldwide. 528 million pounds. 528 million pounds. Being shipped worldwide, a lot of it. They're claiming they're not shipping it, but we've covered this for many years. They're actually shipping it. So the reason we do this not only because he wants to help Fukushima's farmers, which should be arrested. Why did we set up farms in Hanford and Chernobyl? But also because he wants to make sure the elderly eat as much of the Fukushima rice as possible to prevent the children from accidentally eating the grain. I put a link below to that story, and I put a link below to this story too. As fears linger, Fukushima rice rebounds on their anonymity. A Fukushima Prefecture government worker, the government employee, advertising rice from Fukushima at a Tokyo commercial facility in 2018. Shipments of Fukushima rice have rebounded since 2011 nuclear disaster. The bulk of the annual harvest rice at one farm, which is 15 tons, is for industrial uses by convenience stores and restaurant chains, and is labeled as domestic product, not Fukushima. The rice from the northeastern prefecture is still struggling to reach pre-disaster levels for household use because of consumers' concerns about radiation, rightfully so. The nuclear disaster took a heavy toll on the prices of the rice. The comeback has been driven by solid demand for industrial use rice and products sold at convenience stores and restaurants under domestic rice. So they're willing to poison their own. Don't think for a second they won't poison you in your country. Don't think for a second. I don't understand why the world is not putting an army together and go down and take over the nuclear industry worldwide. I don't understand that. According to a Foreign Ministry survey, industrial use accounts for 65% of the shipments of rice produced in Fukushima prefectures in the years through June 2017, one of the highest ratios in all of Japan. No comparable figures are available, though, for the pre-disaster period, conveniently, yeah? There is high demand for industrial use rice from Fukushima Prefecture, which is cheap because it's genocide. Industrial use rice often only carries a domestic label with no mention of the production areas. And since 2012, all bags of rice produced in Fukushima Prefecture has been blanket testing, which is a scam. That's a 100% scam. You can't grow food in a nuclear wasteland without it being radioactive. And they're only checking for cesium, but they're not actually checking for cesium. They're checking for cesium with a Geiger counter like I got up there in real time. Look. They're not looking for alpha or beta or gamma or neutrons, rather. They're looking just for gamma. They're not checking for alpha, beta, or neutrons. Neutrons are plutonium, uranium, curium, which is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod, americium, neptunium. These are all hot particles. Since August 2015, they said no rice is found with radioactive substances exceeding the government's safety standards. For the first 2 years, the standards were 500 becquerels a kilogram of just cesium. They're not checking for anything else, and they're actually not even checking for cesium. They're lunatics. The whole industry is actual lunatics. So last night I had 23 thumbs down while my show was live. When the show was over, it dropped down to 19 thumbs up in the first 13 minutes. At 43 minutes, I had 6 thumbs up. And at 54 minutes, I still had 6 thumbs up. At 3 hours, I had 0 thumbs up, down, rather. So I had 23 thumbs down, went to 6 thumbs down in 54 minutes. 19 thumbs down, 23 thumbs down during the live show. Here we go. Anyway, inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. And that inhaling it, which is no different than eating it or drinking it, increases exposure by a factor of 1 trillion because it's in your body, pulsing energy every second. And then Tokyo, 270 times more contaminated with just cesium than global weapons follow peak. So you got no-go zone, nuclear wasteland. Japan promotes the idea you're racist if you avoid the Fukushima products. Nuclear activists to be constantly spied upon. Hence, you see those phone calls at the beginning of every show. So here's today's headline. Exports of Fukushima farm products on recovery. Overcoming radiation rumors. Overcoming radiation rumors. In a nuclear wasteland. Exports of the products from Fukushima Prefecture have been on recovery path, overcoming reputational damage after triple meltdown. It's, by the way, they call them triple nuclear meltdowns, you degenerate scum coward. One community had 3,000 fake Geiger counters, and 80,000 students had dosimeters around their necks. 5-year-olds marching off to school each morning with Geiger counters around their neck that can only be read by universities later in North America. Like, why are you letting these people vomit all over you? I don't understand it. The exports hit a record high in terms of volume for the third straight year. Third straight year in fiscal 2019. So 2016, 17, 18, 19, or 2017, 18, 19, and managed to remain a high level in 2020. That's 4 years in a row where exports hit a record high than pre-Fukushima. You can't go to the ghost towns, but you're eating food from everywhere in between. Local farmers, local murderers, aka farmers, feel that the unfounded rumors, grown food in a nuclear wasteland, and it's a rumor that there's radiation. About contamination of Fukushima food are receding. Although there are concerns that the government's decision to release into the ocean, we'll cover that coming up. Does this look like a rumor to you? Treated. Imagine being on a bus and driving through a nuclear wasteland. How do you avoid breathing it in? How do you hold your breath that long? Well, it comes in, it's absorbed through your skin too, right? Treated radioactive water from the nuclear power plant. We'll get to that coming up because the IAEA has a story coming up. They're growing food in a nuclear wasteland. And they're shipping it worldwide. And nobody thinks this is wrong? This is not worthy of anybody to cover? I got 17 people on my live show about it. Crippled. Has anybody actually seen the reactors? Does the building to your left look crippled? It's completely gone. There is no building. All those tarps are piles of radiation in farmlands and will create further reputation damage. How's it reputational damage when you're like, these farmers should be shot on sight? There should be jet fighters just flying along Fukushima coastline. If you see a farmer, just go in there and strafe them. They need to be exterminated. They are genocidal mass murderers. You're in real danger. Why ain't you fighting back? Following nuclear disaster, 54 countries and regions restricted imports of Fukushima despicable, disgusting, grown farm products. Why? You know why they restricted it? Because you're not supposed to grow it there, shit for brains. Like peach and rice. Currently, 14 economies, including China and South Korea, are banning the genocide food. It's murder. That's actual murder. The exports grew as restrictions worldwide eased, reaching 305 tons. Like, seriously, we've covered this before. 305 tons is nothing. Well, it's a lot, don't get me wrong. But it's nothing compared to what they're actually shipping. I've never actually seen them use that low of a number before. Like, they got farmers' fields. See all the farmer fields to the right? They're actually cultivated fields. And look at the radiation. Like, it's absurd. We're talking like an absurd amount of radiation there. Tokyo with 29 million becquerels per square meter in the soil. Tokyo drinking water is unsafe. And a single Tokyo award had 13 schools with radiation levels above safety standards. You're supposed to abandon Tokyo. Heck, like with Tokyo irradiated, and according to the mayor, they were 40,000 microsieverts per hour at a supermarket. You got the dust at 4,000 becquerels a kilogram in the air. So when you see all of that in Tokyo, 230 kilometers away, how can you eat food from Japan, anywhere in Japan, let alone Fukushima Prefecture? How does that actually work? I don't understand why we're not trying to exterminate them. They're exterminating you. Criminal charges for promoters of nuclear power. Criminal charges for promoters of nuclear power. Should be criminal charges for a lot of things for when it comes to nuclear. So that's actual reactor 3 over there. Here's your loving media pretending this is reactor 3. Shouldn't there be criminal charges for doing that? Because reactor 3 doesn't even exist. So how can it look like that? 160 feet above the top part right there, they're pretending it looks like this. I know, because I went there. Look at me. Reactor 4 to your right. Look at this. This is actually photoshopped. If you stand up there, you're going to die that day. Look, if you go to work at a construction site with a paper suit on, how long do you think it's going to last? Do you think somebody's actually working in those paper suits were used for work? They're paper suits, for God's sakes. So look at this building. It's supposed to be 190 feet high. Here's another picture of it coming up. Everybody's insane, boy. But the nuclear industry is a lunatic. So that's the ground level right here where my head is to. You can see the building is destroyed all the way just above the ground. Look at what's left of it. This structure that they put here doesn't physically touch the building. And all they done everything with cranes. They built it off site and then they put panels on with cranes. And then they want you to think it looks like this way above the wrecked building. That's the scam. Right, you can see there is no building. Do you think that's a 190-foot building? So they built this bizarre structure, put these panels on it. And even behind the building, look, you can see the debris. See that? You know why they didn't pick that up? Because that's lethal doses. So they've done the same thing to reactor 3 and reactor 4 to trick you. So then reactor 4 though, look what they want you to think it looks like. So that's the whole building right there. Look at it. They want you to think it looks like that on the inside. But there's nothing left to the building. So there's the ground right here, and there's damage to the building right there. The building was way, way, way up here, we're onto. The reactor cores were way up there, not down here, not here, not there, and definitely not in the bottom part of the building. Do you think that's 190 feet tall right there with my fingers to? Is there anybody actually that stupid on the planet? So then that raises the question, why did Arnie Gunnarsson try to convince you that it was really like that when it's actually like this? And so shouldn't there be criminal charges for Arnie Gunnarsson? At least let's get Arnie Gunnarsson arrested. Let's do that.
The division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
So he built the fuel racks for the fuel pools. I put him up where the fuel pools are too. So he built the fuel racks for these fuel pools, exact same fuel pools. And he doesn't know they don't exist.
Now, the division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima. And
Unit 4 has always been my biggest concern. If you watched our website, on the very first week of the accident, I was saying that if Unit 4 were to catch fire, you'd have to evacuate Tokyo.
Is it? Well, him and his wife should be arrested and put on death row for what they done. World's best Japanese peaches from Fukushima now available in Singapore. From Fukushima. nuclear wasteland. The peaches now are still being grown around the radioactive bags, and they're available now. Don Donkey, which is a big franchise over in Singapore, is bringing in the radioactive food from Japan, from a nuclear wasteland. What else are they bringing in, I wonder? Get your radioactive peaches, get your radioactive peaches from a nuclear wasteland, yummy. If you didn't know, Fukushima Prefecture is one of Japan's most famous. It's the breadbasket of the Asian countries, actually. Well, it was. They didn't stop growing the food there. Almost 1 billion pounds of food comes out of that prefecture. Never stopped growing it there. Shipping it worldwide. Hailed as Japan's Fruit Kingdom, Prefecture is located approximately 270 kilometers northeast of Tokyo and produces lethal fruit throughout the year, thanks to its geography and climate. Because that's Fukushima Prefecture. All these pictures of bags are Fukushima Prefecture. One of Fukushima Prefecture's most prized fruit is the lethal peaches grown in a nuclear wasteland. These pictures are all from the same prefecture where the food is to. Contrary to belief, the product from Fukushima is still tainted with radiation risk after the nuclear power accident. What are you talking about? See, look, he thinks it's safe to be there where the bags are to. So is it any surprise the farmers think it's safe to grow food where the bags are to? They're not farmers, they're murderers. Japan needs to be rescued before it murders everybody. Rest assured that all product from the region is actually lethal for consumption. The fact that it's been established by the Singapore government. So the Singapore government says it's okay to eat radioactive food, not just some stupid franchise. What else did they say? Is the Singapore government down here making sure the shit from the wild boars is safe for mushrooms, I wonder? IAEA, this bizarre, degenerate, coward, scum death cult, also known as the International Atomic Energy Agency, they're 100% death cult. They're evil. There's no criminal on the planet compares to the International Atomic Energy Agency. They're not an energy agency. They're a cult, death cult. Otherwise, they would never let Japan grow food in a nuclear wasteland. 1,000-year wait, and the food now is magically safe, is it? The death cult that is known as the International Atomic Energy Agency and Japan today agreed to begin implementing on-site safety review of the water release at the Fukushima Daiichi in September. So let's look at the tanks at the crippled Fukushima plant. 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. In 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. In 2021, they had 1,000 tanks. Is there something wrong with that equation, I wonder? Or is that now acceptable? So 2000 and, let me go back and do that. 2013 was 1,000 tanks. Oh, in 2013, on that same story, they're pretending they're in the building to the right that don't even exist. Because the fuel pools are those red depictions at the top of the building to the left. So these are all journalists in 2013, all journalists, look at them, pretending they're in the building to the right in 2013. And in order to be at the fuel pool, you had to be way above that, way above it to look down on the fuel pools or to come down. Because they're way above the fuel pools. That's where that piece of equipment is. That would be way above the fuel pools. Way above the fuel pools, and the fuel pools at the very top of 190-foot buildings. 2014, they claimed they had 1,200 tanks. 1,200 tanks in 2014. In 2014, in the fall, they claimed they had 1,000 tanks. In 2017, November 27, they claimed they had 900 tanks. 900 large and densely packed tanks that in 2019, 1,000 tanks. So 2017 was 900 tanks. 2019 was 1,000 tanks. 2021 was 1,000 tanks. So 2013 was 1,000. 2014 was 1,200. 2017 was 900. 2019 was 1,000. 2021 is 1,000 tanks. So do you really think they've been storing water? Is there actually anybody on the planet gullible enough to believe they were storing water? NHK report said if Fukushima containment vessels were damaged, then Tokyo would be evacuated. Tokyo would be evacuated. Well, they're not damaged, they're completely gone. Not only that, the fuel pools with decades of reactor cores are gone. So Tokyo should have been evacuated, yeah? But imagine that if a nuclear power plant breaks down, you got to evacuate cities 300 kilometers away and more. 36 million people. The entire operations is expected of water dumpings last decades. The tanks are actually empty. If you fill, and I'll show you coming up, if you fill the tanks up at 2.2 sieverts per liter, you can't build another tank there within a football field because it's a lethal dose. You can't get near the tank ever again. It's a lethal dose, see? Because that's how science actually works. Doomsday-like radiation release, if fire and pull at Unit 4 would be a global, with a G, catastrophe. And I showed you the pictures. It already happened. It's a global catastrophe. And here's some proof of it with a study showing you Xenon-133 radioactive fallout from Japan in Washington at 450,000 times above detection levels after Fukushima. And it persisted for weeks. And this is an actual model of the xenon plume. That's the Atlantic behind me. Where my finger is right now is where I'm currently covered in radioactive fallout. The Pacific is covered in radioactive fallout. The entire northern hemisphere in 468 hours. And 468 hours is 21 days. Hang on. 468 divided by 24 is 19 days. 19 days. The minister's visit today is an important step in our preparation to support Japan with the discharge of water. The Director General, Scumbag Grossi, says, for the International Atomic Energy Death Cult Director, Japan's invitation for the agency to make its first visit on the ground, its first visit at Fukushima nuclear meltdown, its first visit. Here's pictures from 2013 of them, IAEA, right? This, I'm not sure if this is actually photoshopped or just printed and stuck on somebody's back at it's probably photoshopped. First off, this is not Fukushima Reactor 4, which is what they're claiming in that story. Shows their willingness to conduct the entire operation in a safe, transparent manner. Rain with 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 per liter fell on the United States during post-Fukushima peak. How can somebody actually work for the International Atomic Energy Agency? How does that actually work? Hey, honey, I got a job working for the death cult. Hey, kids, you're going to Harvard. You're going to have to come take my job over to cover up the crimes I committed. Congratulations. On-site meetings and activities will help build confidence that the discharge takes place in line with the international safety standards which aim to protect people and the environment. Really? Like, people like who says stuff like that, they should be hung by the neck until dead. And then just left there till they rot. You fill them up with radiation, they won't rot because bacteria can't live there. West Coast hit with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129. So you're going to protect the environment. You're kind of a bit late on it there, scumbags. Which aims to protect people and the environment. Whoever wrote this stuff should have their fingers cut off. 1,500 atoms of sulfur, radioactive sulfur peroxide per cubic meter was detected in the California air. That's 3 studies I just showed you of absurd radioactive fallout, absurd amount of radioactive fallout sustained. And you're going to eat food from Japan? During the first visit in September, international death cult senior officials will meet with Japan's officials and technical lapdogs. They're no experts, they're just murderers. To assess the discharge, there is no tanks. The tanks are there, but they're empty. You can't fill up the tanks. I'll show you what I mean coming up here. The IAEA will review the country's planned activities against international safety standards. Blah, 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 blah. They do no such things. 5th International Peer Review of Japan's mid-long-term roadmaps agreed to strengthen cooperations in nuclear human resource developments and public information about nuclear energy. This is radioactive fog at 10 sieverts. But the Geiger counter is maxed out at 10 sieverts, by the way. So 10 sieverts is 6 places. This video is 100 times normal speed. If you're in that, you die immediately. That's death immediately, anywhere in that area. And anywhere there in the next week. It's even after that. Like, this is the reactor cores. Some of the reactor cores, like reactor 2, went, a lot of it, and the fuel pool went China syndrome. Hit the water tables, and it creates these plumes on site. The earth is cracked in 6 places, and the steam coming up is lethal doses at 10 sieverts an hour. 2 sieverts an hour of better radiation emitted from a single liter of leaked water. 2 sieverts an hour from the leaked water. Which means you can't build another tank alongside of this stuff. So the tanks can't be full because you couldn't build another tank there. The evidence that the tanks are empty is they have another tank there. You couldn't build, you're talking about millions of sieverts. Like, you drop dead if you ran past it. You can't walk away from it in paper suits. What a fucking disgusting industry. I apologize. Sources say there's 1,000 kinds of radioactive material from the reactors. All they tell you about is cesium, right? They've been doing this for 60 years or something, 75 years really. the cesium is meant to trick you and manipulate you and deceive you. Japanese government criticizes TEPCO's poor management. This is 2013 when that's Prime Minister Suga in 2013 saying it's unacceptable for TEPCO, which is not a decommission authority or anything like that in the first place, to be contaminating the ocean. Newspaper, workers are dumping radioactive waste from Fukushima into the rivers. At 13 locations in Naraha, Lydiat, Tamora, workers were simply dumping radiation into the rivers that goes to the ocean. And Naraha is right there at the nuclear meltdowns themselves. Okay, so go back to this story here, 2014, August the 12th. TEPCO to abandon the Riva system amid contaminated water crisis. So Riva, which is French's system, has not lived up to expectations. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operations. It's unused. The first 3 years, well, all the way up until this story is August the 12th, 2014. So remember that date because that's super important. Right? So it was March 11th, September 11th, or March the 12th, March 11th, 2012, March 11th, 2013, March 11th, 2014, April, May, June, July, August, September, April, May, June, July, August. So 5 months. So 3 years, 5 months, there was no filtration whatsoever. For the last 3 years, the system has been unused and kept out of operation. One of the problems will be dismantling the system because it becomes contaminated with radioactive material. That's why it wasn't used for 3 years. It was a lethal dose and poses a risk to workers during operation and maintenance. There is no operation, they just told you that. Underneath the plant, an enormous amount of groundwater continues to flow directly into the ocean. The IAEA is a bizarre death code. Utility has a limited amount of water it can store in tanks on the site. 3 months ago, TEPCO attempted to divert some of the flow of groundwater from underground bypass, but failed to achieve any meaningful results. So they have a big aquifer underneath it, flowing directly into the ocean as radioactive. The water they try to bypass that's coming down the mountain, running through the site, can't be bypassed. That's running straight into the ocean. There's no filtration for the first 3 years, 5 months. How much evidence do you want? I'll dig it up for you. The ELP system, 2014 was also there. People in paper suits. The highly radioactive water with the ELP system has not only damaged equipment, but also prevented workers from spending time working near the system because of radiation. And Tokyo Electric determines human error cause of contamination leak. That story is shown 240 million becquerels of just beta, not mentioning gamma or alpha or neutron, just beta, per liter. 240 million atoms of beta per liter? The tanks are empty. There is nothing in the tanks. You can't build another tank there. This was dumped straight into the ocean. It wasn't partially treated because if you put that kind of numbers through a filter, you can't get within 1,000 feet of the filter within a few hours. It's a lethal dose. You can't change the filter. It's a lethal dose. The lines that are running from the tank, alleged tanks, alleged full tanks, the lines that are running from them into the filtration system would be so radioactive you can't walk near them or over them. There's lethal doses. You can't build another tank within 1,000 feet of a tank that's full of these numbers we're talking about that are confirmed by them. So growing food in a nuclear wasteland. Soil from the Fukushima radiation. You like this story? If you think everything I showed you so far is crazy, lunatic stuff, get a load of this one. It just gets worse. Soil from the Fukushima radiation decontamination work to be reused in new farmland. New farmland. You can't make this up if you wanted to. Watch this. A farmland development project testing the reusability of soil generated from radiation decontamination work from the meltdowns at Fukushima have been carried out by the Environment Ministry in a restricted, difficult-to-return zone. So they got a farm in a no-go zone where they're bringing in radioactive soil and dumping it and growing food. Try making that up on your own. And by the Environment Ministry, in a difficult-to-return zone is a nuclear wasteland, a.k.a. nuclear wasteland. Wait for it. And there's plans to send the crops yield in a no-go zone with contaminated soil brought in and dumped there to market in the future. Oh, and few among the Japanese public know about the scheme to reuse decontaminated soil. The district is a difficult-to-return zone which residents have been evacuated from since the onset of high radiation doses. You tell me they're not lunatics? Like, how do they not cut their own throat every second of the day? How does that actually work? The land it stands on was formerly a rice paddy, was made into a farmland by filling it with soil removed in a decontamination process. There's estimated to be at least 430,000 metric tons of the decontaminated soil set for reuse. The ministry plans to give them to the village once the farmland is completed and have the goods shipped to market after commercial farming resumes. Now, if they'd done that here in Canada, we would go burn them out of it. We'd burn down their houses, we'd burn down their business with them in it. The Canadians wouldn't sit there and let that happen. There's zero possibility that the Canadians in Canada would let that happen. Zero. Survey, not a single prefecture backs reuse of radioactive soil. Except for Fukushima, of course. But this picture here will shock you. Not a single prefecture backs the reuse of radioactive soil. This is the no-go zone. Those mounts behind it is the radioactive soil. They're slicing open the bags and dumping the soil out to turn it into a farmland. A central government plan to reuse mountains of contaminated soil generated from land cleanup operations after the Fukushima nuclear disaster that's still ongoing got a muted response from other prefectures. The National Prefecture Governor's Survey, the exception of Fukushima, found zero support for the reuse of contaminated dirt for farmland development or road construction projects. 5 governors in Yamagata, Yamanashi, Nagasaki, Kiyoshima, and Okinawa flatly expressed opposition to reuse regardless of the projects the government has in mind. And only soil measuring 8,000 becquerels per kilogram will be reused to ensure the annual radiation doses from exposure are too low to affect humans. 8,000 becquerels per kilogram is 512,000 becquerels. They're only talking about cesium, by the way. That's Gallows' laugh. 512,000 per square meter, which is the size of your dinner table, say, where they're growing food. And, they say that won't be any harm to humans. But I showed you the studies earlier where a single atom will cause a tumor. Go get your peaches. You think they're picking up the bags because they're bored? They're picking them up so that they're probably eating the peaches on the tree because they don't know any better. If you don't pay attention to what you're eating. You can have cancer and die this week. If you're eating food from this despicable, disgusting nuclear wasteland, 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. Oh, that's other people, Dana. That can't happen to me. $11 becquerels a kilogram, children will start to see heart problems. How can you avoid it in a nuclear wasteland, say? Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. Okay, so you got, let me recap that for you. So you got 50 becquerels in adults lead to irreversible lesions in the organs, vital organs on top of that. 11 becquerels, you start to see heart problems for children. 50 becquerels, you see irreversible heart damage. So look at these communities that are not abandoned. This is United Nations scum degenerate, coward, United Nations Scientific Committee on Effects of Atomic Radiation. The average disposition density of cesium only, they're only talking about cesium. So it's only the second row, look. So that's per square meter. That's some of the numbers of just cesium. There's 1,000 other fission products. So you got to multiply these numbers by 1,000 to get the actual number of per square meter of radioactive fallout. Because these cowards are only including cesium. So you got all these communities are incredibly radioactive. Look at Fukushima City, 300,000 becquerels per square meter of just cesium. And they're growing food right alongside of the bags on top of that and harvesting it. If that was here in Canada, they'd be shot right away. Locals would have shot that person immediately. So you look at all these communities. These are people. These are the numbers of radiation right here. But they left these people here in the nuclear wasteland. They didn't let them leave. So you can see the whole prefecture, 30 million of these bags. So why are we sitting in silence? I'm not. I guess I am. 21 people on my show. 23 thumbs up, which is really good for me since I took down my site 2 weeks ago with 24,000 subscribers and 1,600 videos like this. Lunatics, right? That's the definition of lunatics right there. Just growing food is lunatics. Harvesting food in a radioactive wasteland, they should be executed on site. So that row there is per square meter of just cesium. We're going to multiply it by 1,000 to include the other radioactive isotopes. Because there's 1,000 other fission products. So you got to really multiply it by 1,000,000 to get the real number. 30 million 1-ton bags. That's Al Jazeera. 30 million tons of contaminated soil stocked in open-air sites. There's 150,000 sites. Right? They kind of brought a lot of them to a different spots, but there was originally 150,000 sites. Cesium, by the way, immediately damages the heart muscle, causing heart attacks. They haven't even got face masks on, not that they're going to protect you, and with paper suits, they can't protect you. Extreme increase in mortality caused by heart attacks, and the death rates might give the creeps to some people. This is just a 1 month number. Was extra 12,700 people dying of heart attacks in a single month. So you think that's just 1 month that this has only happened? Yeah, a lot of the farmers are crippled. Yeah, a lot of the farmers have died. Absolutely, a lot of the farmers are crippled. I might actually have that headline in here coming up. More radioactive cows. New scandal appears to be much wider. And so the government allows cows to emit 100,000 counts per minute of radioactivity. Humans will be required to undergo full body decontamination. These are lunatics. See, they don't know any better, right? It was beyond our expectation that straw would become a source of radioactive contamination. That's July the 18th, 2011. And they get all of this food and they're claiming that it's safe. Oh, fucking idiots. Excuse the language. Man selling highly radioactive cattle feed blames the government. I never thought it'd become contaminated because they're 150 kilometers from the meltdown. Like, Tokyo was 270 times, the air was 270 times worse than nuclear weapons testing peak. And so they're checking for radiation, they claim, right? They're only checking for cesium, and they're not finding any. And they're growing the food in the nuclear wasteland, but they're not finding any radiation. The food is surrounded by massive amount of radiation, but they can't find any in the food. They're not even trying, see? It's about murdering us. Now over 1,300 cattle suspected of radiation contamination have been shipped. Internal radiation doses of 80 microsieverts for eating 2 pounds of radioactive beef. These are huge numbers. Doctor, 3,000 plus microsieverts internal radiation for residents in a town 40 kilometers from the Fukushima plant. Gee, I wonder how that could happen. Japanese on average exposed to 100 millisieverts a year of internal radiation from Fukushima via food alone. So I showed you that story where 12,700 people died in a single community of heart attacks. It's probably that spot there, right? Something in my eye. I rub it in deeper now, make it go blind. 2,600 cattle contaminated, vegetables at unsafe levels, no centralized testing system, only voluntary test, July 26, 2011. They didn't stop growing food and they weren't testing it. They didn't stop shipping it and they weren't even testing it. They didn't start picking up eggs till 2013, by the way. Government now ordering complete ban on all shipments of beef from Miyagi Prefecture. Iwate may be next. The end of July 2011. The limit of 500 becquerels per kilogram. They dropped the numbers down late 2012. They gave the farmers Geiger counters, like I got up there, and said, if it's over 500 becquerels a kilogram, don't ship it. And the farmer's like, we don't know how to use it. And those Geiger counters, like Safecast making Geiger counters, they're literally one of the most evilest things I've ever saw was what Safecast is doing. That's actually despicable and evil. They're making Geiger counters that can't possibly be effective, handmade Geiger counters, and then using that as the absolute number. So evil, it defies logic. All of it defies any rationality. So 500 becquerels per kilogram, these are lethal doses. It's a lunatic society. The nuclear industry is nothing but lunatics. Discovery.com, in the event of a nuclear Armageddon, don't eat the steaks. Newborns and fetuses are concentrating contamination. Fukushima beef being shipped to United States restaurants, October the 15th, 2012. They still haven't even picked up a single bag yet of the 30 million one-ton bags. Radioactive beef over seasonal limits from cows raised far outside of Fukushima. As Fukushima beef shipments to the U.S. resumes this week, October 19, 2012. What a stupid industry. Another Fukushima farmer in exclusion zones are already bad as Chernobyl. I saw the splashing ash after the explosions, baby cows dying one after another. All 20 calves born at a farm, all of them, were stillbirths 60 kilometers from Fukushima. But you're going to be eating food around a nuclear meltdown. We see radiation from Fukushima in the soil in Southern California, especially deserts. High concentrations in seaweed prevented harvest in 2014. Also found in cattle and chicken feed. Cattle fed a California dairy farm had 300 picocuries a kilogram. 9-month gap between sample harvested and when received by the lab. UC Berkeley study revealed 3,500 picocuries a kilogram of cesium deposited on nearby roadside. What a disgusting industry. Mutation found in sea life along the U.S. West Coast. Deformed spines, brains, hearts, eyes reported by officials. Malformations, including extra brain lobes, hunchbacks, parts of faces are missing, unusual limbs. Fukushima, September 22nd, 2015. In the United States. Spike in animal deformities on the west coast of North America soon after Fukushima. Hundreds of baby cows with distorted legs and other malformations. We know there's more out there than that. Problem may be more widespread than reported 2015. Hawaii dairy farmers are fighting radiation by feeding boron to the cows and goats. The ultimate betrayal, eh? Oh yeah, just give them boron. It'll be okay to give the kids the milk. The ultimate betrayal. Oh, Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste, 100,000 becquerels a kilogram, to be incinerated. 100,000 becquerels a kilogram. 1 billion pounds of debris in the exclusion zone of radioactive debris. They're going to burn dirty bombs. And a lot of that comes to North America in 3 or 4 days. They're grinding it up and bringing it across Japan, prefectures right across the country, and burning it in the incinerators. 2 locations in the coastal area of Naraha town. An actual nuclear wasteland burning nuclear debris. Within a 20-kilometer radius of a no-go zone spanning across Naraha and 5 other municipalities along the coast, debris caused by the quake and tsunami amounted to an estimated 474,000 tons radioactive debris. So when it comes to radioactive food, here's how this actually works. Look, we got the studies, an overwhelming, by the way, amount of studies showing how radiation is uptake by vegetables and fruits and wheat and stuff. And let me just introduce you to it. So you foliage uptake of cesium in strawberries. Well, it's not just going to be the leaves, it's going to be the strawberries. It's going to have the most of it. And wheat and foliage and root uptake in tomato plants, fruit plants, and accumulation of radionuclides by plants as a monitoring system. Potatoes, radioactive fruit plants, radioactive vertical soil transfer by tree roots. So they know how this works. There's no way they can't. Like meadow ecosystems for cows and sheep and stuff like that. And you have fruit trees uptaking radionuclides, grapevines. So they know that. And they know this a long time. So the question is, why is 90% of nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? Because all nuclear power plants are releasing radiation. So look around. Each of these pictures, you see they're surrounded by farmland as far as you can see. Everything right up close to the plant too. All plants hemorrhage radiation, and a lot of it's going to end up in the farms, and you're going to eat it. Do you think this is an accident? They built the nuclear power plants right in the center of farmlands. Why are nuclear power plants built in farm communities and farmlands? Even future nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. Because the whole industry is the very definition of evil. This is the definition of evil, what you're seeing there. That's actually evil to do this. Why would you ever, in goodness gracious sakes, have a nuclear power plant built in the middle of farming country? So they done this on purpose to poison you. I showed you the studies earlier. It's not like they don't know. They done it to poison everybody worldwide. There's Chalk River, Canada, surrounded. That's an actual nuclear meltdown. Right there, one of the first ones in history, Chalk River. That's surrounded by farmland. Look at it. Wrap your mind around it. That's actually a crimes against humanity, and that's omnicide. The nuclear industry is, it hates us. It actually hates all humans and insects and animals and birds and mammals. It actually hates us. It's exterminating you. Look way, way back. Look at this. Farmlands, everything surrounded by farmlands. I was shocked when I went looking for pictures of nuclear power plants. I was like, what the frig am I looking at? Why are they all surrounded by farms? So I kept getting more pictures, and every one of them surrounded by farms. I couldn't find a single picture that wasn't surrounded by farms. Nothing funny about it. This is murder. This is a genocide, ecocide, omnicide machine. That's what nuclear is. It's gone to war against you. They're gone to war against you and your planet. They're gone to war against all species. That's what they're doing. This is a war against all species. This is absurd amount of contempt for all species and humanity. You have to be some kind of evil to do this. Some real special evil to continue to do that. To not stop it means you're incredibly evil. To not get up and stop this genocide machine is actually, that's illegal. Oh, by the way, that's a future nuclear power plant in the United Kingdom. That's not a power plant, it's a future one, surrounded by farms, as far as you can see. Can't go to the graveyards because of radiation, but it's okay to eat the food in a nuclear wasteland. I don't know about you, but I can't sit in silence. $24 thumbs up. Done really good tonight. We raised $10 last night. Thank you for donating. We got to raise another $90 to get oil sending unit for the boat. We only got maybe 10, 12 days of summer left, according to the forecast. And then the weather starts getting colder after that. And so today's Thursday. I know it's a waste of time, but I'm going to do a fundraiser tomorrow to try to raise money to get out on some kind of species count before the season's over. We don't need to raise very much. A couple $100 will probably do it. If anything goes wrong, then I'm stuck wherever I'm to, because I won't have enough money to make it back. But I'll take the chance, because he took down my site 2 weeks ago with 24,000 subscribers. I can't stand the thought of losing the last part of summer. And that's the show anyway. I'm probably going to turn up tomorrow in 12, 14 hours and do a fundraiser. Been a tough couple of weeks, eh? I couldn't even do a show a couple of days ago. I was so burnt out. And I felt guilty about it ever since on top of that. Who cares, right? Let's just poison everybody. Why don't you just send everybody a suicide kit and get it over with? But there's what I want to go do. Head back out and do species counts. Go back out there and do some species counts. You think the nuclear industry would be happy to get rid of me for a week? I think they'd donate a few $100s just to get rid of me. Get me off here for a whole week. I got let me show it to you anyway. I got a folder here with stories that I haven't got to. You probably can't see it, but there's 530 stories there that I haven't got to yet. All of these are stories I got to get to. I don't know why I'm laughing, because I'm going to have to read every one of them 529 stories. Every one of those 529 stories. And do a show and tell the story, right? Come out and challenge the lie. By the time I get around to it, which is going to be, in fall, before I actually get to all of them stories, there's going to be a couple of thousand stories in that folder. I'm still out grabbing stories before they disappear. All nuclear, right? And I put them in the folders so I can find them later. Otherwise, I won't find them. And try to hold them accountable, right? At least call them on it. Here's a lie, here's a lie, here's a lie. Next story, here's a lie, here's a lie, here's a lie. Here's the evidence, here's the evidence, here's a lie, here's the evidence, here's a lie, here's the evidence, here's a lie, evidence. Here's another story, here's a lie, here's the evidence, here's the lie, here's the evidence. And I've been doing this for years. Because nobody's ever done that before, right? It's an absurd amount of work. But what it does do, though, is it shows unequivocal to those that are paying attention that the industry hates all species on the planet with a passion. They absolutely unequivocally despise us. Yeah. Okay, well, let's play my shitty Beethoven, my conspiracy song. I can't even have a closing song, or it's a conspiracy now. I just happen to like Beethoven. I apologize. And Beethoven is recorded in 440, which is the proper resonance, right, for human bodies. It's a soothing resonance. Good night, everybody. I guess I'm back tomorrow with a fundraiser. We got to get back out there before the weather changes for the worse. Once the weather gets colder, I can still go out in the boat because I have a diesel stove on it. But I can't go back out in the woods because you'll freeze to death. I'm too fucking old for it anyway. But I'm trying. I'm doing the best I can. I'm just a person like you, but I go hardcore every day. Here's your atoms for peace, look. Right there. A10 Warthog. Fires 1.5 tons of depleted uranium munitions a minute. a minute, a ton and a half of DU. Well, DU used to be called low DOLRAM, depleted uranium low-level radioactive material, but they got rid of the latter part of that acronym and just called it DU, because it seems like, oh, it's depleted, it's okay, but it's not. It's full of technetium-99, uranium, strontium, plutonium. And the stuff they use for that has already gone through a chain reaction. It's not low levels, see? Anyway, I should do a whole show on that at some point. At some point, that's France's model of the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, North America, Canada, Iceland, Greenland, Europe, covered radioactive fallout. I'm currently right here. Now, this model is just one of many, many models covered in radioactive fallout. There's no spiders in the woods here. There's no fish jumping in the ponds. There's no flocks of birds flying in the sky. And I don't understand why the world is not reacting appropriately to this. It's not too late. Come on over to the winning team. We are not going to sit in silence. God bless and hugs for everybody. Have a great night. I took the valve out of the front of the Zodiac because it was leaking. I must have screwed up when I put it in yesterday. I took it out and hopefully I reseated it properly this time because the front deflated quite a bit last overnight. The other valve stayed true, but maybe I got a hole in it from a rock on the road or something that I forgot. So just in case, tomorrow I'll go out and spray the front of the Zodiac inside outside down with soapy water and look for bubbles, I suppose, just in case. Yeah, Port Angeles is talking about spiders in their house. That's right, yeah. No, you see them in your houses. You'll see them, like if you put a chair outdoors close to your house, you'll see a spider web going from the chair to the house. Now, if you take a plant at the same time and bring it out there, you won't see spider web going from the plant to the house, but you'll probably see a spider web going from the base of the plant, from the container, to the house, but not from the plant, because everything is radioactive. Good night, everybody. God bless. See everybody tomorrow, maybe. Keep your eyes on my site. I'll probably be doing a fundraiser. If we can get a bunch of people to donate $10, we'll head back out and get the last expedition of the year in for insects. And we'll head back out in the ocean when I get enough money to order in the oil sensor. God bless. Have a great night, folks. See you tomorrow. Take care now. Yeah, Ted, it has a great big O-ring, so the thread doesn't matter because you have a great big O-ring to seal it. And there was no thread sealer on the other ones that I took out. I hear you though. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. Take care now.